Buenos días, buenos días, buenas tardes, noches, bonjour, good morning, good evening. Hello to everyone. Welcome to the NGO CSW New York April 2026 monthly meeting. We will be admitting people into our meeting, but I just wanted to give you a quick welcome on behalf of myself, Rosa Lazardi, the co-chair, and my fellow co-chair, Pamela Morgan, who will come um, in just a moment to give her welcoming words. But while we have people enter, thank you again for joining us. We have made it to the other side of the CSW, and we're so grateful for all of you who have joined us. We will have highlights. Yes, let's get some cheer here, because we made it, and we made it with flying colors, with vibrancy. And yes, I think we were all tired, a bit tired, those of us who were here in person and online and logging in from different time zones. However, I think that we came out revitalized, re-energized, re-inspired, re-educated about so many issues, not only related to access to justice, but relating to what is happening in the UN and around the world with so much going on. So thank you for joining us. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Please keep yourselves muted. We have a stellar panel today. And so without further ado, we're going to continue with the co-chair updates, and then we'll go on to the CSW informative panel. Then we'll have Q&A from the audience, and then we'll close. So for now, please introduce yourself in the chat. It's great to see where people are joining from. Thank you for being here, and I will pass over to my fellow co-chair, Pamela Morgan.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Rosa. And again, welcome. I ditto everything that Rosa said. It is a delight to be here with you today, fresh on the other side of NGO CSW 70, which was for me one of the most invigorating experiences I've had for quite some time. I want to thank our wonderful office staff, my co-chair, our executive committee, UN Women, and all of you for the tremendous support that we received during CSW. We had, I feel, a very successful forum, and I'm going to give you just a few highlights. We had over 650 events, parallel events, over two venues. So we were at the Salvation Army as well as the Church Center, and our forum was a full 10-day forum. We did not end to celebrate Eid. We had the full 10 days. We had 5 regional caucuses: North America and Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, Latin America, Caribbean, and MENA. All 5 regions held caucus meetings during CSW 70. We held 4 conversation circles. We are grateful to our partnership with the International Labor Organization for hosting us for the conversation circles in their office. We had smaller groups than normal. However, I think that the conversations had a richness due to the intimacy of the group. We also hosted a great artisan fair. We had a tremendous variety. We had some complaints from the building because we did not clean up the way we should have at the end, so we have to look at that for next year. But the vendors had a wonderful assortment of items for sale. And then we had our civil society briefings. The first was looking at women's access to justice through diverse lenses. We had an overview of the negotiations hosted by NGO CSW, but focused on the Women's Rights Caucus member, Jen Rausch, and she gave us a wonderful overview of the negotiations process. We had a Crimes Against Humanity treaty, which was extremely interesting, and that was led by Ndai Sahur, who is part of our community here, and Layla Sadat, who is the architect of the Crimes Against Humanity treaty. We then had a Madam Secretary General, excuse me, a briefing where members of civil society, regional members, were able to come and share their thoughts on having a woman Secretary General. It would be the first in the history of the UN. We hosted in the UN a UN 80 examination briefing. And for that briefing, we had Undersecretary General Guy Ryder, we had UN Women Executive Director and Undersecretary General Sima Bahous, and UNFPA Executive Director and Undersecretary General Dian Kieta. And it was a wonderful conversation. It was more open than some people had anticipated. Guy Ryder had a lot that he wanted to share, and it was very, very informative and well received. And then we had a reception. It was our second reception since the COVID pandemic, and we had over 250 activists who came together with the spirit of solidarity and a fun-loving spirit, and they came together to eat, drink, and be merry. So that is a overview of the CSW 70 Forum. But what I want to talk about now is the topic that we covered in one of the briefings, the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty. And that is going to last. The negotiations are going to end in 2028 or 2029. We are proposing that NGO CSW New York initiate a working group that is going to be an arm of this process. And we will be able to work with Layla Sadat and her team in an advocacy arm in helping to get the word out about the Crimes Against Humanity Treaty. So we will keep you involved and keep you informed as to ways that you can become involved. So I'm going to turn it over now to Rosa for additional updates.
Thank you so much, Pamela. And I am going to heart that because that was a very quick recap of what of pretty much most of our work. I mean, there was always work behind the scenes, but that was a fabulous recap. Thank you, Pamela. The points that I want to bring up, one is sort of looking forward, kind of looking back at what happened in the CSW, but looking forward with regards to the UN 80 reforms and the work that we've done around UN 80. Beginning last year, for the CSW, we were able to hold a meeting in partnership with the UN Foundation with the President of the General Assembly, Annalena Baerbock, and we hope to be able to continue that. We're also in touch with colleagues from those that are following up on the GEAR campaign, the Gender Equality Architecture Reform, specifically the spearheading work that our executive committee member, Lily Nkuzimana, has done from the Baha'i during the CSW, and having some meetings with key actors around UN 80. We are going to continue and then liaise with the Feminist Cross Coalition. So that is something to look forward to as we sort of move on from the CSW and the work that we do throughout the year. Also to bring in the Women Deliver Conference and link with that, which is happening in Narm in Australia from the 26th through the 30th of April, as part of the ACT Steering Committee communications working group. We are a member of that Strategic Communications Working Group of ACT, which is focusing on gender-based violence and violence against women. There will be a team of 7 participating as part of that working group, and NGO CSW will be there, represented by myself. So we are making the links and bringing that information to you as part of that conference very quickly. The ACT working group will be part of a pre-conference meeting that is happening on the 26th on gender-based violence, ensuring that throughout the conference, the Women Deliver Conference, it has a cross-cutting theme. And we're also going to be part of an ACT concurrent sessions on strategic foresight for GBV advocates. I will put some information about that in the chat. For any of those who are going to Women Deliver, please, let us know. And it would be great. I mean, I know many are going, but it would be great to be in touch. And we're also going to be part of a strategic leadership roundtable during that time. So we wanted to bring you that as a way of sort of moving forward from the CSW and connecting with these areas of work, UN80 and the gender equality work. We'll be continuing that through our UN engagement working group, part of NGO CSW. So we will move forward. And I would like to introduce Mads Minower, who is our office manager and also has worked as the program coordinator for the NGO CSW Forum, who will be presenting participant survey results. Now, again, this is for those who have answered our survey. These are the results. So over to you, Mads. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here presenting these results. We normally do this every year just for transparency and just to enable us to see where we can work on, what we can do better, and also get some advice from you. So we're excited to present these. Give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay. Let me go ahead and so based off of 1,002 survey results, here is our regional data. So we had a majority of our participants in the North America and Europe region. We had over 110 countries represented, which was about on par for last year's forum as well, CSW 69. We will be sending out this presentation in a follow-up mailing after this meeting, as well as in our YouTube video. This information presentation will be disseminated. So here is our regional data. We also had a pretty wide range of ages attend our forum this year. 91% identify as female, and more non-female individuals attended our forum as to last year. As for organizational info and forum attendance, we had about half of our attendees attending the CSW forum for the first time. More people attended virtually this year, but we still had a great number of individuals attend hybrid and in person. Most individuals were ECOSOC accredited, but we had a good, solid representation from non-affiliated and non-ECOSOC accredited organizations. As for our forum experience, we did go up in numbers on the hybrid and in person. Averages, we went from 4.2 to 4.3 average for hybrid, and in-person was 4.3 to 4.44. However, we did go down a 0.1 in the virtual. So we will have to make some adjustments there. As for the hybrid experience, schedule navigation varied across all three experiences. Safety was considered very high, and accessibility was considered high. As for the virtual experience, same kind of goes here. Schedule navigation was varied. Safety was also very high, and accessibility was a little bit lower. So we will work on increasing our virtual accessibility. As for our in-person experience, accessibility and safety were both very high, and schedule navigation was kind of mixed. As for primary goals in attending, all of our hybrid, virtual, and in-person attendees showed that networking, advocacy, and educational experiences were the main reasons that they attended the NGO CSW forum. You can see the orders kind of differ, with networking, advocacy, education being the 1, 2, and 3 for both hybrid and in person, while education was the main goal for virtual, with networking at the bottom there. Most people traveled to the NGO CSW forum to attend both UNCSW and the NGO CSW 70. Some people were invited or sponsored to attend the specific event or session, while most people came to attend the forum, whether that was in the UN or with us at NGO CSW. There were some barriers to participants, with the highest barrier being overlapping or conflicting scheduled events, with then the second one being the cost of travel and accommodations, and then time zone. We did not have many barriers for the lack of accessibility, and our most rated, or our favorite part, highest rated favorite part of the forum was the parallel events and networking and interacting with other attendees. Civil society briefings were also rated very high. As for the least beneficial part of the experience, we had exhibit booths at the top, which I believe we are planning on eliminating this part of the forum for next year. 80% of individuals out of the 1,000 people that answered this survey answered that they would be likely or very likely to attend a NGO CSW forum in their region. However, compared to last year, we had 8.6 participants. I'm sorry, 8.6% of participants were affected by visa issues. So visas were definitely a major barrier to this year's forum. And I think that is all from me. I will go ahead and stop there just because of time, but we will be disseminating this information. I hope that you found this helpful for future forums, and we hope to take these surveys and implement it into our programming for the next year. Thank you so much. I will hand it back to the co-chairs.
Thank you so much, Matt, for that information. It's a lot to digest, but we will be publishing this for everyone's information. So now we will turn to our distinguished panel. We're very excited about this panel, since it's the first meeting since the NGO CSW forum. We are going to be focusing on the CSW political process. We're also going to be providing insights from the CSW, overall impressions. We'll talk a little about the negotiations and how they were different this year. Hopefully we'll hear also about the uniqueness of this year's vote and decision-making for the CSW, and information about resolutions that were introduced, and also looking at how the UN80 process may impact our CSW mandate. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Pamela to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Rosa. I too am delighted to have this rich panel to come and share their insights with us. And we gave them 3 guiding questions, and I'm going to give you the questions that we have presented to them so that you, our audience, understands what we're looking for. Question number 1. In light of the impact of the CSW revitalization resolution, what are your overall impressions of CSW 70, the highlights, challenges, and concerns of the outcome document negotiations? Question 2. Can you provide insights on how the UN80 process impacts our CSW mandate? And question 3. What was encouraging about the CSW 70 experience that can guide us going forward to CSW 71 and beyond? And we are pleased to recognize our speakers. We have Noah O'Hary. He's Vice Chair of the CSW 70 Bureau. He's First Secretary, the Permanent Mission of the Principality of Liechtenstein to the UN. And the bios will be put in the chat. We have Lopa Banerjee, Director of the Civil Society Division of UN Women. We have Julia Masabrio. She's Coordinator of the Trade Union Development Corporation Network, Equality Department, International Trade Union Confederation. And then we have Latia Orniel, who is with the Women's Rights Caucus. Welcome to our esteemed panelists. And we will begin with Noah. Noah, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pamela, and good morning or good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today as the co-facilitator of the agreed conclusions of this year's session. Flavia, my fellow co-facilitator, could unfortunately not join us today. She's at the hearings for the SG candidates. So looking at these questions, of course, now that it's been over a month, it's also a good time to think back of what has happened with a bit more calm and reflect what we have achieved. I mean, there's definitely something to be said about, it being like the CSW happening in a context of both like the revitalization and UN80. I mean, one is, of course, the fact that there were certain novelties to the format of CSW that came with the revitalization, including, as you've seen, the different, like now with the high-level meetings, etc. But of course, also this kind of commitment now, or even stronger commitment to have a short, succinct, and action-oriented outcome document. I think starting at 4 pages and having a final outcome that is less than half as long as it used to be is definitely a welcome step in that direction. I think that's something that was one of the objectives that the Bureau had that we felt very, very happy with in terms of what we got out of the negotiations. There's, of course, been other changes that were a bit more independent of the revitalization. I want to say, for instance, the Bureau's decision to have the agreed conclusions adopted on the first day, which was something which, was kind of also, I mean, it was one reason for it was the timing, but of course, we also figured that having this stronger political and ministerial presence there is actually helpful for the momentum and actually to gather more support, anticipating that it would be difficult this year, because of course, as you know, there's also a bit of a difference between the gender ministry, so to say, and the foreign affairs, oftentimes also in terms of like how, these positions play out in CSW, and the idea was there to really gather maximum support by having higher level presence in the room as well when we go for for the adoption. Now, in terms of the negotiations, of course, you probably have been following for a bit. I mean, this is always a bit of an emotional process. It's never that easy. It's always also very personality driven. I think there's a few. I mean, this was now my fourth time at CSW, and of course, the first time as in the bureau. But still, I think there's certain trends that we've seen over the past years that have just been, let's say, accentuated even more. I mean, of course, we have, this backlash that we often talk about, I think also manifests more concretely when we see that there's certain actors in the room that are very, influential with certain delegations, and there's more coordination going on in terms of how we can really push back on certain terminology, etc., and really kind of level their influence in a way that we haven't seen before. There's also an increasing issue of misinformation and disinformation, including among delegations, in terms of what is actually agreed language, what has been agreed in the past, what hasn't. I think there was often, in terms of a sense of not really being sure, in terms of is this actually what we've done before or not? And so that's also becomes difficult, because then you really it gets harder and harder to argue when the fact that something has been agreed is no longer accepted the same way. And then, of course, we're also having difficulties, with one particular delegation that's now a member, and is of course very influential and has a lot of red lines, and that's also something that's quite new, I want to say, in terms of dealing with that. I think this was the first year, of course, and there's reason to believe that this might be more difficult, of course, because of course we see that there's this was the first time around. There's going to be more preparation, organization ahead of the next round, and unfortunately, the fact that we had a vote for the very first time is probably will not be unique to this session. I mean, of course, there might be a chance that we come back to consensus, and we very much welcome that. But at the same time, the way I've experienced it going around this time, I would foresee it to be very difficult if the level of ambition was to be maintained, to actually find a consensus again with the current composition of CSW. Yeah, so that's for that. But I'm also want to end on a good note, saying, I mean, you've said something what's been encouraging, and I think what's always encouraging is also the coordination that happens in the final days, the final weeks and days leading up to these adoptions. I mean, we've really learned to appreciate amazing colleagues, civil society actors that have really been supporting us throughout, and especially towards the end, to really make sure that we come in prepared. We will manage to get this document adopted, and of course also same for this resolution that was put forward on the definition of gender in the second week. So basically two, I think, very important victories that we've had there, and also a good basis to build on for really saying we need to stay organized. We need to keep on having this level of coordination and be prepared for what's going to come in CSW 71 and onwards. Thank you very much.
Noah, thank you so much for that honest and comprehensive overview. Your participation is really appreciated, and thank you for acknowledging the good work of the civil society partners who were so diligent in making sure that that member states had the information that they needed to defend the agreed conclusions. Thank you. And we'll now move on to Lopa, who is such a fierce warrior when it comes to civil society and CSW. Lopa.
Thank you so much, Pam. Warm greetings to everybody on this call. Lovely to see all of you. Thank you so much for your leadership, for your sustained advocacy, and for the knowledge and the commitment that you bring to this discussion. Noah, thank you. And thank you, Flavia, so much for your heroic efforts during the CSW. And I want to say, it was certainly a tough CSW, many firsts in this CSW, good firsts, but also a clear picture of what is the zeitgeist now and what lies ahead. I do want to say something that is, that I think really bears reflection. Many of you have heard me speak where I spoke on NGO Consultation Day, and I said this even at that time, that the topic, access to justice at a time when rule of law is in tatters, mostly in many parts of the world, to discuss access to justice at this moment of breakdown of rule of law everywhere was a really important piece. Even as we are speaking now, the debate for the Secretary General is on. If you listened to, I was listening to that before I came onto this into this call, and of course, a lot of the discussion is around that, around rules-based multilateralism. The candidate who was speaking was Ms. Bachelet, and many of you know she was my former boss, and so the discussions, the questions from member states are around this aspect, around what will a rules-based multilateralism look like at this point in time. And with that in mind, I think that the agreed conclusions that we got from this CSW at this time of polarization was stellar. So really, many thanks to you, Noah, and to Flavia for being able to lead the conversation, and to member states for staying the course. Very many thanks to civil society for continuing with the inputs. I think the reason we saw such deep and serious progress in terms of policy outcomes from the agreed conclusions was also because of in some measure, because of the CSW revitalization and some of the processes that came out of it. For example, the multi-stakeholder hearing. The multi-stakeholder hearing that took place ahead of the CSW and informed also the CSW laid out some very clear processes in terms of, for example, access to justice as not only a structural issue, but a democratic concern. The fact that came through, the fact the very serious issues that the multi-stakeholder hearing laid out in terms of intersectional barriers and exclusion, centrality of women's rights organizations, under-resourced institutions, shrinking space. And so we had a set of agreed conclusions that recognized for the first time, and this is serious, community justice workers, paralegals as integral parts of the national justice systems. The fact that digital justice has entered the global gender equality justice agenda. This is a major recognition. It leads to policy norms. It leads to the work, resourcing the work of civil society and women's rights actors in this space. For the first time in the Commission's 70-year history, the Commission recognized women in detention, and that was explicitly recognized as part of a global gender justice agenda. The fact that the Commission brought in new language around transitional and international justice mechanisms, you can imagine how important this is in this time of persistent conflict everywhere, and the aspects around women, women who are survivors of sexual violence in conflict. How important this is for those that are working on that area. The fact that access to justice was seen as a cross-cutting governance issue. The key recognition by member states that states' commitments to review and amend discriminatory laws must continue. The recognition of women's rights and civil society as key actors in the delivery of access to justice, and the need to resource that. the need to recognize them, the need to resource it. These were all really important, deliverables of this commission in this moment of what we are seeing as a landscape with deepening, not just political and economic uncertainty, but deepening normative uncertainty. Noah just spoke about this. We are now at a time when this normative uncertainty is going to be part of our work going forward. We are heading into the HLPF. The next CSW 71 is on the SDGs. We know that the SDGs have become contested. And so this so the work that was done within this CSW, yes, I think that the fact that this agreed conclusions was voted upon, yes, that is a sign of growing polarization, but it is also a demonstration. The fact that that the agreed conclusions prevailed as they did, that is also a sign of a different kind of feminist solidarity and coalition building within the intergovernmental and normative process. And we need to be able to build on that as we go forward. So in terms of, what are we going to look at, going forward? I think this is a really important aspect of it, around the fact that, and the reason that, that we were able to both get this level of sophistication in terms of policy prescriptions coming out of this CSW was because of the link between the normative frameworks and the ways in which they were informed by policy, lived realities. The fact of the inputs that came from the regional consultations, the inputs that came from the multi-stakeholder hearing, the inputs that came in to member states, also from civil society, in terms of grounding these policy recommendations in lived experience. This is going to be crucial for the next CSW as we look at the SDGs, what is working, what is not working, what is required in terms of the next steps. That link between lived reality and normative expansion will be crucial, not only in terms of the content, but in terms of the political ways in which to navigate the space going forward. To your question around, what are the link, how does UN80 impact CSW? This is going to be a discussion. The executive board of UN Women has, when they, in the last executive board session, the executive board made a recommendation very clearly for a discussion between the Commission and the executive board around UN80, and that will take place. So we will wait for member states to have that set of discussions in terms of how we see this going forward. And finally, my last point on this is that, in every which way this moment, what we are hearing now in terms of the next Secretary General and the opportunity that presents in terms of the debate, the forthcoming HLPF, the forthcoming UNGA discussions, the UN80 discussions that are going on that civil society is deeply part of, and the forthcoming next CSW 71. You were celebrating coming out of this CSW 70 at UN Women. We've already started meeting for CSW 71. Our discussions for CSW 71 have already started because we have the expert group meeting coming up very soon. So so at this time, the criticality of continuing to position gender equality as a system-wide political priority, at all times, not only for CSW, at all times going forward, including for the forthcoming HLPF and the UN80 discussions, and even more for the UN Secretary General discussions. This is going to be crucial in terms of what we look at going forward and learning from the CSW. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Lopa, for all of this input. I think that just to say, everyone, there will be a replay of this available online, and we will send it out because it's a lot to digest. But just to highlight, the point that the CSW was in a way very revealing of many points, what we can do. They agreed conclusion prevailing and knowing, where we stand in terms of this work on gender equality and needing to build on this for it to be a system-wide priority. And in a sense, that is the work that we've highlighted as NGO CSW NY as well, that it's not just the CSW where we do our work, but it's throughout the year. So now we will turn to hear from our civil society partners. First, let me introduce my colleague, Julia Masobrio. Thank you so much for being here. Julia, as mentioned, is the coordinator of the Trade Union Development Cooperation Network, the Equality Department with International Trade Union Confederation, ITUC. So a strong voice for gender equality, a lot of good work, as you put in your background, Julia, fight for democracy. So over to you, Julia. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosa. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting us, and really a big thank to the NGO CSW forum, because I do think, Lopa referred to that and many others, your role in terms of bringing all of us together, of preparing us, of coordinating us throughout the CSW. I think this year it was even more evident because of the more explicit, probably, obstacles that we had to face. So I'm really grateful, and ITC is really grateful for the work that you do. So two key points I want to raise. The first one is our take on CSW 70. And I would raise 2 points here. One is on content, and the second one is on politics. In terms of content, as trade unions, we are very happy with the document. When we saw the zero draft, we were quite concerned because there was zero reference to the labor agenda. And what we got at the end, also thanks to alliances with progressive feminist movements, is a lot of good language on rights at work, the ILO conventions, gender-based violence and harassment in the world of work, equal pay, care. So we are very happy when it comes to that specific take and our key ask as trade unions. But also, I think in terms of language on systemic change, I think the document is strong, especially given the context. No, it talks about multiple intersecting forms of discrimination. It talks about systemic and structural barriers. It talks about power imbalance. So we fear to lose that language, especially in the last track of negotiation, but they are there. But another point that I think also Lopa raises, that these wins are also, and also Rosa referred to that, something where we are building policy coherence, we are linking the dots. So it's not only this smart negotiation. Last year it was a tremendous year, and we did a tremendous effort. We had Beijing Plus 30. We won in March 2025. And what we won, we brought it to Sevilla. So now we have gender budgeting when it comes to the Financing for Development Forum happening this week. And we have to keep reminding the FFD office and everybody working on FFD, guys, we do have gender commitments in Sevilla. Finally, explicit commitments, we need to work on them. We have investments in the care economy. Just to mention care as I think one issue that has been more and more evident, and we managed to, there are other issues, but I take care as an example. And then we went to Qatar. And again, our objective as ITUC, but I think our objective as joint trade union, civil society forces were to say everything we got at the Beijing Plus 30 declaration, we want to see it in Qatar, because gender equality is about social development based on social justice. And we won again in this geopolitical setting. So in terms of content, I think we have to celebrate the victory that was a result of a very strong effort from all of us. In terms of geopolitics, I do think, and I usually look at the bright side because I think it's more constructive. It is true that the US played, they played the game that we have been seeing them playing since the Trump administration came in. But we also saw, thanks to somehow the very open position of the US and other governments, we also, that position kind of forced progressive forces to stand up. So what happened on the first day was that the US tried to postpone the adoption of the document, and they lost. They asked for a vote, they lost. Then we all know they pushed for a resolution, and the voting on the last day was very tight, but they lost. So I do think that when we look at what next, and Lopa said it, we are already working on the next CSW. We have to first prepare governments, and I think also Noah referred to that. It's so difficult. You talk to one government's representative, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. We also, in our organization, have problems of working in silos, but we do see that also in governments, between New York and capitals, between different ministries, we need to anticipate. We need to prepare governments, especially in the Bureau, especially among those members who have a voting power, because it can be the case that we will vote again. We need to link the dots, as Lopa said. This week, FFD Forum, then HLPF, SDG 5 is not under review, but all the SDGs under review need to have gender lens. Then we go to the General Assembly, and then next year, we start with a new General Secretary, hopefully a woman. And then we go to the UN Commission on Social Development, where we want to keep governments accountable what they said in Qatar. And then we go to CSW. And then in September, we have the SDG Summit. Guess what? We will start discussing what happens after 2030. So it is 100% linked to what will happen at the CSW. So we need to build arguments on the added value of the SDGs and for gender equality to be at the center of whatever will come after 2030. And I do think that we have a lot of arguments to say that even if we are far off track, there is no other agenda as strong as the SDGs. This is the global compass that we have achieved, and I don't see others. And is it perfect? It's not. But I do think, and we think as trade union, it's a huge achievement to have such a comprehensive agenda, and we have to defend that and improve that. So this is what I wanted to bring on to share with you, and I'm obviously very, very happy to receive any question or comments because this is a collective effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was so insightful. You basically have outlined the process step by step, building on it. You mentioned, and in leading up to the SDGs and the added value of the SDGs. And if I might just add, you went through the processes, but let me just add the process related to climate change, because that is also a sub-focus of the next CSW, the environment, climate change, and disaster risk reduction. So that's really bringing in the full agenda. So thank you so much. I want to turn to Latia Arnell. Latia, thank you so much for being here. Latia is a UN program advisor with Outreach International. We know a leader in LGBTQI+ issues globally and at the UN, but here also a representative focal point for the Women's Rights Caucus. So thank you so much, Latia. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for the floor, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining for this meeting. So just for the people who maybe not know the Women's Rights Caucus, so the Women's Rights Caucus is a progressive feminist coalition with over 400 members working specifically on CSW process. And we have an advocacy and language working groups that are coming together at some point later in the year to follow the process of the agreed conclusion and the political outcome, the negotiation, and everything related to CSW. And for this year, fortunately, we had colleagues on the ground holding the line and working closely with UN agencies, working closely with UN Women, but also working closely with the co-facilitators to make sure that civil society voices are heard, but also to support the work that has been done by the co-facilitators, but also by UN Women, where we shared brief with member states to ensure that they are also a part of holding the line during CSW 17. So for this year was historic for us. As mentioned before by Noah and Lopa, it was a year for so many first times. We had the very first short in Beijing focus agri conclusion. Why? Because it was related to some of the discussion that happened during CSW revitalization around 2024 and 2025 to improve accountability for commitments, to also improve the follow-up of the Beijing Declaration, but also new the discussion around meeting out of New York City every 5 years for the Beijing Declaration and celebration. We also had our first voted outcome document in 70 years. But this year we had 8 amendments brought by the US on the table. Fortunately, these amendments were not considered, and member state decided to group the amendment and decided no action on all the amendments. This made us adding like 3 types of votes during CSW, where we had votes on the amendment, votes on the agreed conclusion, and also vote on the resolution that has been presented by the US. We tried to state that the Beijing Declaration defined gender 30 years ago, but we've been able to hold the line and bring on the table evidence showing that the annex that was presented should not have any action on it. Unfortunately, working closely with member state, we've been able to achieve the no action of the neither on the resolution, neither on the amendment presented by the US. So in terms of analyzing the outcome document with our feminist progressive lenses, something that we've seen during the negotiation is that we had a relitigation of agreed language during the interactive dialogue on accelerating implementation of the agreed conclusion, around gender equality, around the ICPD process, around participation of feminist group, women's rights groups. We also had sovereignty covered creep during the negotiation, where we heard member states talking about implementation as appropriate, bearing in mind national priorities. And we definitely understand that there's the negotiation at international level, but there's also this piece of the work that needs to be done at regional and national level. And it's true that member states should be able to implement the agreed conclusion following the national policies. But our issues, our concerns about around that was that we wanted member states to consider the lived realities of population of women and girls in all the diversity at national level and regional level, so that when they're bringing all the conversation around implementing the agreed conclusion, we definitely have the human perspective in how the agreed conclusion are implemented and how the policies around the achievement of gender equality at regional and national level. We've seen the US operating differently since the Trump administration. We had a lot of citing of executive orders, calling language DEI and gender ideology. We've seen we've seen gender equality being under attack during some of the negotiation. And we've also noticed that there were a lot of pressure, a maximum pressure on SRHR. But we also understand that SRHR has always been under pressure. Language around comprehensive sexual education has been under attack for so many years during CSW, during agreed conclusion negotiation. But we've been able to have some achievements. And as I mentioned during the CSW revitalization and looking forward to CSW 17, we had a discussion around what do we want to see in the document. We also had discussion around scenarios, what could be a good, a great outcome, a robust outcome, a robust agreed conclusion from CSW 17. So we had moderate loss around the holistic focus on access to justice, because it's true there were a lot of discussion and consideration put on how the process was different this year, but at some point we had to come back and say the discussion that needs to happen around access to justice. And we've been able to hold the line on that, so that member state consider and member state had conversation around access to justice, because we wanted to have to have agreed conclusion that speaks to the realities, but also that speaks to the priority theme of CSW 17. We've been able to hold the line on visibility of the International Conference of Population and Development, ICPD, multiple and intersecting form of discrimination. We've been able to also hold the line on language around sexual and gender-based violence, CSO's engagement in the process, because we've been able to also show the importance of CSO's participation in the process, and to show the work that we've been doing for many years, and all the work that we've been doing around advocacy and language priority in the document during the process. But we've seen monumental loss grounds around sexual health and reproductive rights. And as I mentioned, these have been contested and under attack for so many years. So we think that we should rethink the way that we are approaching sexual health and reproductive rights, and especially on what language has been agreed in other processes, and how we can ensure that these language are also a part of the negotiation and part of the CSW agreed conclusion for the years coming. Other key events, as I mentioned, we had the resolution that has been presented by the US. We were not seeing this coming, but it came during the second week, and we had to mobilize. And I really want to say shout out to some of my colleagues who were on the ground during CSW in New York to hold the line and working closely with member states, working closely with the co-facilitators, working closely with UN Women to bring evidence on the table, not just to contest the actions by the US, but to show evidence for so many years that has been kept so that people understand that that we are not pushing for new things, but we are actually pushing for things that has been agreed for many years, and we wanted to hold the line and save most of the grounds that we've been able to achieve all these years. So in terms of the action done by the Women's Rights Caucus, so before CSW we organized meetings. We had meetings with the different working groups, the advocacy working groups and the language working groups. We followed the process. We worked with member state. We did also markups to each of the drafts from the zero draft to the final version of the agreed conclusion to ensure and also adding what we call evidence in the document so that member states understand that the language we are pushing for or the language we're suggesting are not new language that we want to see in the document, but are actually language that has been agreed for many years. And we wanted this document, this year agreed conclusion, to be as strong as possible, even if the process were different from the previous years. During the 2 weeks of the agreed conclusion, we tried to we did a press release. We work on fact sheets that we've shared with member state. We also work on 2 pages. We did a dissemination. We did voting projection that we've shared with member state so that they see that civil society is also reflecting on the possible outcome of the process, and we the work that we're doing is actually to help them to support the process they're in terms of negotiation, but also voting and adopting the agreed conclusion. And we're still working on cross coalitions, even around the UN80 process. We're working with the UN80 cross feminist movement coalition, where we are having discussion closely with UNFPA and UN Women, but also with the UN Secretariat to understand the process and also to disseminate information so that our broader civil society community understand the process, where we stand, and to bring together different actors and stakeholders to prioritize actions around both CSW, HLPF, ICPD, the UN80 process, to demonstrate how our commitment at civil society, and that it's important for us to hold the line for gender equality and for the mandate of CSW. Thank you so much.
Latia, thank you so much for being here with us and for giving us that comprehensive look at the work of the Women's Rights Caucus and helping member states come with a positive agreed conclusions and a positive outcome for CSW 17. So at this time, we're going to open the floor for questions for our esteemed panel. And you can raise your digital hand, or you can put your question in the chat. Are there any questions? Annie Jacobs, I see you. Do you have a question? Because I can't see the top of the screen, though. Are there any questions for our panel? Well, this is the first time that I've ever seen a panel that didn't have, and that goes to show how comprehensive your presentations were. Yeah, okay, Karen Lang.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I didn't want to start because that's a really overall question I put in the chat already. Listening to Julia emphasizing again, and that's very important, the implementation of the Agenda 2030. I just wanted to ask us if we are paying enough attention to macroeconomic patterns, financial market conditions, and the proposals of the part of a pact for the future, especially the actions 47 until 53, the reform of the financial markets and the beyond GDP ideas through gender lens. So that's what I'm wondering about, if we are strong enough to look there and to put that in place.
Thank you, Karen. And we're going to move on to Claudine. I see your hand is up. We're going to take 3 questions at one time, and then we
Thank you.
will pose them. Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair. I'm so grateful to be here, and then I'm happy to see a man among of us, Mr. Noah. I was wondering if he has a plan to inspire other men and the young men to join this amazing movement to empower women, because we need men to join us, to help us to talk to other men. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a third question before we turn the floor over to our panelists?
I think there was one in the chat.
Can we maybe get a copy of the agreed conclusions? Oh, how will UN reorganization affect CSW going forward? So we have our 3 questions, and the floor is open to our panelists. I don't know who wants to go first.
Julia, maybe you want to come in on the question related to that, and then I'll come in after you.
Of course.
And then Noah, of course, on men and boys.
No pressure, Noah. On the point on the reform of international financial architecture, I mean, I think there is still a lot to be done. We pushed very strongly in the Pact for the Future, and what we got was, in our view, not ambitious enough. Sevilla had the same call to reform international financial architecture, which is a huge call, by the way, obviously. So I think we have to also unpack it and be very concrete. So if we look at the follow-up of Sevilla, in our view, 2 concrete things that are happening are: one, the negotiation of the UN Tax Framework Convention, which can be huge, but also the opening in Sevilla, even if not as ambitious as we wanted, of a UN debt workout mechanism. So there are many elements, obviously many more elements than these 2, but I think these 2 are already some key elements that are essential to also democratize the way global governance of the economy works. On beyond GDP, obviously everything is linked. There is I would say, this is not new, obviously, but there is a renewed interest and attention of discussing the beyond GDP also as follow-up of the Pact for the Future. I, for example, heard actually, I think this week there will be side events on that linking in the context of FFD Forum. I've also heard a proposal for side events at the HLPF on beyond GDP and post-2030. So I think both the Sevilla follow-up, the Pact for the Future implementation, and the post-2030 are all context where I see the beyond GDP discussion. There is interest, there is appetite for that. So I think we have to link the dots, because SDGs are about going beyond GDP. So again, it's not new, but how do we make it concrete? What does it mean to go beyond GDP for women? So that's where I think we have to become concrete also in our proposals to government. No, otherwise it becomes very difficult for them to do policy, and for us to keep them accountable. Thank you.
Maybe Noah, since there was a question directly to you, I'll come in after.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that question. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a bit of a novelty that we did a co-facilitation for Greek conclusions. Usually that's only done for the political declarations, but I think a recipe that works is, of course, also ensuring representation. And I think, having Flavia and me, woman and a man, Europe and Africa, I think we kind of ticked a few of these boxes to make sure that, kind of not only that we have different representation at the, basically leading the negotiations here, but also, of course, like making sure that we can, also like showcase that this is something that we're all invested in a way. And I think, I'm a firm believer that gender equality benefits everyone, of course. And I think that's something that over the years, and we had this language on men and boys being engaged, it's, I think, something very crucial. And that if my participation serves as a role model for other experts to step up and become members of the bureau or lead these negotiations, I would be very happy, because I think it was a great experience.
I'll come in with a couple of points on this link on this point around beyond GDP that you were talking about, Julia. I think that it's crucial as we are right now in the post FFD discussions, FFD4 discussions, and going into the next round. And I think this for us certainly at UN Women, but overall, I think for the feminist economic justice agenda, it's crucial that this conversation around beyond GDP looks at linking debt, shrinking public resources, and tax systems. So the fact that budgets, debt, and tax systems are not neutral, and linking those in a very clear way to prioritize that the development is not simply linked to growth metrics, and that there is a very clear understanding that we need to be looking at advancing progressive and ambitious tax reforms that are looking at very clearly curbing illicit flows and ending tax practices that are draining public resources from countries which need it most. There has to be this conversation. This was one of the conversations that one of the questions that was posed earlier when I was listening into Ms. Bachelet, in terms of an international financial architecture that there has to be a challenging of an international financial architecture that continues to prioritize debt repayment over human development. We are not going to be able to move forward if we continue with that kind of a financial architecture. And the recognition that when you are focused on debt servicing, then you are crowding out spending on health, education, social protection, and climate resilience. And so, the predictable outcome of that is always going to be an unjust economic system. So this has to be at the center of the conversation when we are talking in terms of the post FFD for conversation going forward. So I think that will be very, very important as we move forward. On this issue of men and boys and men's accountability around this, there has been so much conversation around this, how men and boys for gender equality. Some of the previous CSWs have also looked at the agreed conclusions, have looked at the role of men and boys. But I think that, the really important point right now is to talk about male accountability for gender equality. This is no longer male allyship. It is no longer, men, no longer about standing on the sidelines or don't be a bystander or those kinds of campaigns that are there. This is centrally focused on male accountability for gender equality. It means men recognizing and making space for women's leadership. It means ceding space and sharing power through institutional transformation. And it means recognizing that male accountability for gender equality means a relooking at the ways in which power is organized, both institutionally, politically, and in economic and social systems. And that recognition is crucial as we go forward and when we talk in terms of men and boys for gender equality, because even when we are looking at this conversation around the manosphere and how that is, young men and how they're moving away from gender equality and so on and so forth, yes, this is about recognizing the overall aspects around care and support also to men who are in situations of vulnerability. This is about an economic justice system, and that is not prioritizing those that are being excluded and marginalized. And that includes men in certain situations and in certain social contexts where they are at the interstices of race, gender, ethnicity, etc., etc. So it's about recognizing that intersectionality of gender, power, discrimination, and having men recognize that, and therefore this the approach around looking at intersections of power and gender when we are looking at male accountability for gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Lopa. The whole look at patriarchy as a system. What are we going to do with that whole patriarchal system? But before we move on to Alison Brown, I think we need to go back to the question on UN reorganization and the effect on CSW. How do we see, and I don't know if that's something that you're, any of the panelists are comfortable talking about, but how do we see the reorganization? You know, they're looking at mergers and all types of things. How is that going to affect CSW? And will it affect CSW? Maybe not. What are your thoughts?
So as I mentioned earlier, maybe Noah, you want to come in on this as well? But as I mentioned earlier, colleagues, friends, there is going to be a conversation. There is going to be a discussion between the CSW, the Bureau, and the Commission, as well as the executive boards of UN Women and joint boards, but also UN Women Board. And this conversation is, this is a member states themselves. So just, civil society is not the only ones who's asking this question. Civil society has been asking this question. Member states have been asking this question as well. And so this is a recommendation from the executive board of UN Women. And so it's very much a discussion that will take place. And so that I'm going to leave it at that, but maybe Noah will want to talk about it.
I could just echo that point in terms of member states. I think, it's very much still a bit of a, let's say, for us, it's really like making sure we thoroughly understand the suggested mergers, and also we're basically in this opinion building process now, that moving on to this kind of third work stream of UN80, right? So basically really kind of finding a way to analyze the implications of it, seeing, because of course, there's the efficiency argument, but then of course, there's the big mandate argument, and how these can actually be protected and safeguarded, because it's not all about resources, but it's also very much about what these agencies and organizations actually do, right? So I think that's definitely still an ongoing discussion. So it's still early to say what impact it will have, but I'm also looking forward to that discussion within the CSW Bureau and the UN Women Executive Board on the potential merger.
Thank you, Noah, and Lopa for fielding that difficult question. And we have time for Alison Brown before we close. Alison? Alison, you're muted.
I was also not visible. In view of the attitude that the United States government has towards women's issues and their unwillingness to fulfill their contract with the United Nations by giving attendees to UN conferences visas to attend them, why do we persist in having these consultations in New York when there are wonderful venues around the world who would probably be more welcoming? UN Women just opened an office in Bonn, where I'm sure there are appropriate meeting rooms. CSW used to be in Vienna, where I know from the great Human Rights Conference back in 1993 that there is lots of room for a wonderful conference. And yet we're crawling back to New York, where our delegates, somebody from my delegation was refused a visa. Our delegates are not able to attend, and the diplomats of the host country are actively hostile to our intentions. Thank you.
Thank you for that stimulating final question, Allison. I don't know who would like to respond. And if all four of you would want to give your own version of a response to that question, that might be a good way to end the meeting.
I mean, maybe I can go ahead. That of course, understand your frustration. Of course, the visa issue is of course something that affects many CSOs, and it's of course not conducive to having this forum to be as inclusive and as representative as possible, and also not for the negotiations. Of course, the reason why the negotiations take place here is because, I mean, not just it's the headquarters, but also this one UN seat with the universal representation. So it's kind of in terms of having the most inclusive process for member states to take place, it needs to happen in New York, right? That's kind of, I think, the premise why it is still happening here, and why it's also going to continue happening here, even if, let's say, we have this potential case that the CSW itself will rotate every 5 years. That was part of the revitalization. Even then, the negotiations will still take place here. But then, of course, the forum itself would take place elsewhere, where, of course, then maybe there's more, it would be easier for other issues in terms of visas, etc. But that, of course, so it will still be happening here.
Just to add, as you know, this was one of the biggest discussions under the CSW revitalization, this whole point around, and it was a repeated recommendation by civil society around, rotation of the CSW. And the good thing is that one of the aspects of it was in terms of the revitalization resolution did look at every 5 years the review processes, the review moving, rotating, as Noah just highlighted. There's also the aspects around the fact that it is, of course, the negotiations, because this is where member states are. I want to say that given now with everything that is happening and the creation of various global offices, even the UN is changing right now. It's with all of these the UN agencies themselves also moving out of New York and having more global hubs, in various parts of the world. There will be newer ways of working as we go forward, even when the negotiations will continue to be here, at least for the foreseeable future. There are different ways to look at it and work. The CSW methods of work discussions will continue next year. Again, there is a discussion on CSW methods of work, and so this aspect around how can CSW be in spaces, how can more access be provided? I think we also need to be thinking through ways in which it can become more accessible. It's not necessarily always the question of being physically present, but how does CSW expand access to more people that are necessary for it to be a truly inclusive process, reflecting the views and expertise for whom the commission works. So I think with that in mind, I think the discussions are going to continue, in terms of what those modes of accessibility are going to be, and what that means, whether that is geographical or other ways to expand access.
Julia, Latia, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to follow up on what Lopez said in terms of what meaningful participation means, and what we have experienced as ITUC, as we lead the Workers and Trade Unions major group to the UN, has been increasing shrinking space when it comes to being able to listen to the negotiations, not only at the CSW, but throughout. I remember during COVID, we could listen to the negotiation. For example, when it comes to the HLPF Ministerial Declaration, we could speak. So obviously they are intergovernmental negotiations, but we could know what governments were saying. We could give our view, obviously, as part of the major groups and other stakeholders, but that made the all difference, because we could follow up with governments. I mean, the level of accountability was much higher. And I've been seeing that in following CSW, following FFD, following HLPF. Last year, the UN Commission on Social Development heading to Qatar. More and more what we hear from co-facilitators in the different negotiations is this is a closed door negotiations. You may then have separate meetings with the co-facilitators, which is not obviously the same. Or you can sometimes see the compilation of comments, but again, it's not always the case. So I think that makes a big difference. No, and now what has been happening with CSW is that we rely on those governments in the case of trade unions where there is a good level of dialogue, so that we can know what is happening and we can react. But listening, being able to at least observe and speak, that's a totally different level of participation. And to me, that would make a big difference besides where the commission is happening. But obviously the point of the US right now, and we also had, I think all of us had many delegates who could not get their visa, who could not travel basically. But I think following the negotiation is a key point.
Thank you so much, Latia.
I just wanted to echo most of the thing that has been said, because I also remember that with the Women's Right Caucus, we had conversation with UN Women during the CSW revitalization process, where we brought that on the table, even the visa issue, the rotation of CSW in different countries, and being able to achieve the review of the Beijing Declaration and implementation was a victory in a certain way, for us to ensure that there's at least this one piece of rotation of CSW, but we're still putting on the table this issue. Even myself, I wasn't able to get my visa renewed, even though I've traveled to the UNs for the last 4 years and returning back to my country. So this is a big issue that we are also facing ourselves in coordinating coalition, but also with members of different coalitions. So this is a topic that we are definitely putting on the table. And we also tried to do an assessment around rotating CSW in the different countries. But even for some of the countries where we don't have executive orders, it's not always easy for civil society to get visas, even to travel to Geneva for the Human Rights Council. We are still facing issues. So I think we should definitely come together and have like a deep conversation, a deep reflection around how possible, how feasible this is, so that it's not just a question that we're putting on the table of member state and UN instance, but we are coming with clear recommendation to ensure that there's both intergovernmental participation, but also civil society participation in not just CSW, but in most of the processes that are happening at the UN level. Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for those wonderful last points. Thank you so much. I want to ask everyone to show some love for our panelists, Noah, Lopa, Julia, and Latia. Thank you so much for this wonderful monthly meeting. We will hopefully see you at our next monthly meeting, which is on May 17th, Tuesday. And I want to invite everyone to open up your cameras and let's get a gallery view. And as we do here every monthly, we just let everyone say goodbye and farewell, and maybe our slogan, which is equality, peace, justice now. Please say goodbye in your own language. Adios.
Ciao.
Bye bye.
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 Ciao.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Braveo.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Ah, this was
Thank you for the
amazing.
teaching, for
you.
everything. Thank
Adios.
Bye bye.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Ciao,
Bye
ciao.
bye.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye.